communication. All right, so let's continue. Writing tips, introductions, and welcome to Winchester High School. My name is Mr. Lister, and I'm going to be talking to you through this video series. Let's start off by asking a question. What does an introduction do? What is its work? So if you're sitting there with a partner, or even if you're sitting there by yourself, I'd like you to take a couple of sentences, hit pause on the video, and spend a few minutes thinking about what introductions do. It's crucial that you think about this for yourself before we move on. Otherwise, it will be impossible to try and teach you a few new strategies or to get you to do something different than what you've always done. So oftentimes I find that students, once they get a grasp on one form of introduction, they stick with it tenaciously, and ask to abandon that particular form or formula, they pause, they balk at their ability to do so. So what does an effective introduction do? All right, welcome back. Effective introductions accomplish basically four things. The first thing they do is they identify the author and the work. This helps you to understand, to give context to your listener or your reader as they look through your work. If they don't understand what text you're talking about or series of text you're talking about, then they're going to be completely lost and not know what's going on. And that's inexcusable. Second, the introduction should explain or explore the problem that this paper hopes to address. What series of thoughts or what textual knot have you located and yet you've untangled through your paper that the reader needs to understand to fundamentally grasp what you're trying to tell them about this particular text? Three, and perhaps most importantly in this whole thing, an effective introduction should showcase the thesis. There should never be a question about which sentence is the thesis after we've finished reading an introduction that's done properly. It shouldn't feel separate from the rest of the introduction. It shouldn't feel divorced from it. It shouldn't feel like there's a big gap between all the background information and the thesis itself. And that's part of what it means to showcase in a thesis effectively. It should be the logical culmination of the thinking and the explication that's happened in the introduction itself. Finally, the fourth job of an introduction, even though it's not here, is it should be to entertain your reader a little bit, to pull your reader in. But that's really a secondary concern. We'll talk more about that as we go forward. To begin an introduction, the idea that introductions are tricky is true. It's the most crucial paragraph of your paper. And that's why you've always been given, to some degree, formulas for how to begin your essays. And you all have these strategies that you're working with. But again, we don't want to be slavish to them. We want to be able to interpret why they exist. Anytime a teacher of writing gives you a formula for how you should be able to do something in a piece of writing, it's never meant to be a hard rule. Rather, it's meant to be a guide. And if you understand the theory behind the formula that you've been given, you'll come to be able to use it with a lot more subtlety and complexity instead of just employing it as you've always done. And if you don't learn to question the reason behind the strategy you've learned, you'll never be able to grow as a writer. You'll simply keep recreating exactly the same kinds of essays you wrote as a relatively young student. And as you go into college, that's where we get many of the biggest problems that I've seen in my time as a college writing teacher. We see a lot of kind of arrested development where students are still writing like they were as sophomores or juniors, and they haven't really grown. They don't know how to grow, and faced with adult issues and adult ideas and adult texts, they have a hard time kind of moving forward. So some strategies you might have learned. One, quotations. Quotations are fantastic. However, the quotation in and of itself shouldn't just be chosen randomly from Bartlett's quotations or from some potable quotation thing online. Rather, the quotation should be something that is directly and very closely aligned with what it is you want to talk about in your paper. More often than not, the best way to do a quotation is to quote a scholar who is talking about the same work that you're talking about or the same issue you're talking about in the work, or who is addressing the same kind of social issue you're dealing with. The more closely the quotation is related to what you want to talk about, the less likely it is to swamp your writing. And what I mean by swamp your writing is if you brought in a quotation about Gandhi and you're writing about Frankenstein, the distance between Gandhi and Frankenstein is so huge that you might not be able to bridge that gap. Your reader may still be thinking about Gandhi even as they attempt to work through your argumentation. And if they do that, they have a divided mind. And if their mind is divided, then your introduction has been unsuccessful because it hasn't focused your reader's energies on your argumentation. And I hope that makes sense. Again, the quotation should amplify the effect of your essay, should bring your reader into the essay. It should not distract them after the introduction is done. The same thing can be said for an outside connection. Another fantastic strategy. These outside connections, however, need to be, again, really closely related to what it is you want to talk about. For example, if we wanted to talk about, let's say in Frankenstein, since it's about parenting, if you wanted to use Roe v. Wade as your outside connection. The problem with that, of course, is that Roe v. Wade is such a controversial issue that it's going to be very difficult for your reader to get beyond that. Depending on how strongly they feel about that particular issue, they may never recover from it. And again, that's going to pull your reader out of your paper instead of leading them into your paper, and that is inexcusable in an introduction. The same thing can be said of broad generalizations. If you start off saying, since the beginning of mankind, humanity has sought to question the role of motherhood in society, there's no real way for you to work from that into the specific kind of parenting that happens to be at the core of Frankenstein. It is too broad to get there. And what ends up happening is that there's a stress fracture in the middle of your introduction. It keeps you from being able to fully articulate your argument. It keeps you from being able to showcase your thesis, and that is, again, the main goal of an introduction. The last two small ones that you can use that are also very useful but need to be done carefully are the use of rhetorical questions. Why is it that Victor Frankenstein cannot connect with his wife, Elizabeth? If you said something like that, then you're going to be on target because it's small and it's about the text itself. But you can't have this be a crutch. You can't ask a series of rhetorical questions in every single essay, or it's going to show a lack of flexibility on your part. Similarly, defining key terms can work the same way. If you go to the dictionary and use a dictionary definition in one place, as long as it's done carefully and crafted well, you can get away with that once a class. But that's about it. If you use a definition for every single introduction, then it's going to, again, you're going to look like a one-trick pony and you're not going to have anything to say, and your professor is going to note that. Again, these all work as long as you use them properly. So we're not trying to change the way you write necessarily. We're trying to grow the series of strategies you have to become more subtle and complex and more nuanced over time. So before we begin any introduction, we need to think about the two key elements that kind of prompt us to write in the first place. One, who is your audience? And two, what is your rhetorical goal? Unless you have defined these two criteria, you'll never have the ability to really kind of tailor your argumentation to the proper audience and think about its size and scope and things. So who is your audience? Are you writing to a bunch of third graders, or are you writing to all of WHS? Are you writing to seniors at the Jenks Center at a book club, or are you trying to write to my first grade son? If you don't know who that is, then it's going to be impossible for you to hit the right level of maturity in terms of and strategy in terms of your introduction. And of course, in this case, no, you're not writing to all third graders or to WHS. In this class, you're writing to a series of budding scholars, and the reason for that, or the thing that's important about that, to realize that you can get rid of a lot of the extra stuff you've done to attract attention. You don't need to have fireworks and flash in your introduction to get people involved. What's going to be the best way to pull your reader into your writing in that class in a professional level is a really compelling argument. That's going to be the key element to writing particularly well at the upper high school level, and certainly in the college and graduate school level. We don't want to be boring, but we want to nevertheless be focused on what our goal is in the class. So avoid hyperbole in your introductions and make sure that you are addressing your audience properly. So this brings us to one of our other kind of sins in writing. There are some teachers who have real issues with the idea of saying, in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, as the first sentence of your paper. And that's boring. That commits a sin of being boring. But it's not the worst thing in the world, because it does get out of the way the idea that you're focused on your text and that you're going to start off in the text to stay in the text. And that's a key element to making sure that you grow as a writer. So as a stepping stone, now that you realize from your previous writing classes that it's important that you engage your reader in certain ways, now it's important that we kind of whittle that down and that we put your argumentation at the core of what you want to do. And that's why I would say that it's not the worst thing in the world for you to use that simple signal phrase of in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But it would be better, since you have to have that information anyway, if you could try to say the same thing, get this same information across without becoming formulaic or boring. And that's what we call style. However, you should always consider this, and I think this is the back and forth that we're having between your younger writings and your more mature writings. You need to understand that style should never come before your content. If you write a terrible paper and it's full of frilly flourishes, you may show a great ability of style, but your college teachers are not going to be impressed with that, nor are your professional peers. They want you to actually get to the content itself. And this is the biggest thing that I worry about in your introductions is right now we get a lot of flair, but we're not exactly sure what our introductions are trying to do. And that's the thing that we want to solve as we go forward this year. So without further ado, I'm going to take you back to our homepage. You all know how to get there, Homework for Ms. Lister. You can Google it and it'll pop right up. And then if we go over here to Writing Resources, hopefully my cursor is being lit up right now, and click on it, it'll take you to a series of these writing resources, one of which you're going to notice right here is that the little PowerPoint you just saw is going to be located here, and this particular video you're watching right now is going to be right here. Please bear in mind that as this year goes on and as I get a chance to create more of these kind of flipped writing tutorials, we're going to end up with a whole series of individualized lessons that you guys can come back to and watch, pay attention to. And my goal is to eventually have assignments, secondary assignments for you to go through here so that you have the ability to kind of reteach yourself or continue to teach yourself some of the key elements that we're talking about with our writing skills. And I hope that's one of the key elements that allows for technology and education to kind of be useful. Scrolling down the page then, and again, we have all college writing resources here because I'm interested in you learning how to write for the future, not to write for yesterday. We're going to click on Good Intros versus Bad Intros at the University of Chicago. And this is going to take you to their writing program and their series of resources that they have available for their students. We are going to start here on exercise number 4, revising the introduction, conclusion, and polishing the draft. But if you have any other questions about this part of the writing process, what you can actually do is click right over here under Writing Interns and Tutors, and then you can go to Advice for College Writing, and that's going to give you a series of assignments that talk about how to write in college, and that's going to be something I hope that is really useful for you. Please be aware of that. Here we're going to go back to Introductions and Conclusions. What I'd like you to do right now is pause this video and read this page carefully. Again, you're going to have to do that through the web page. And when you come back, I hope that you'll have a better understanding of exactly what it is that we're talking about and how introductions should be framed and phrased as you prepare to write in college. Okay, at this point you should have read this web page completely. If you haven't, please hit pause right now and go back and do it. And the reason I'm going to have you do this is to show you a couple of things. They go through this in this particular piece and talk about the virtues of these two different introductions, And when they go through these introductions, I want you to see a couple things. Although you'll notice the first one sounds a lot like a high school piece of writing, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. The second one is much better. However, in both of those pieces, if we look at this, you will notice that they both have a very similar kind of layout. The first is that starts off in the way that we have talked about being worried about before, within War and Peace. That doesn't mean it's not functional, however, it is kind of boring. But you can notice the second one here. Throughout War and Peace is exactly the same strategy. Neither of them are great in terms of style, but what saves the second introduction and not the first one is the idea that it actually has a bit more content. It has a lot more to say, and it's going to end up being that the second introduction is much better because it doesn't have to do a lot of hyperbole or a lot of bells and whistles to get people to pay attention because the writing itself is solid, or solider, more solid I should say, and that's going to be the thing that's most useful. So on to today's assignment. Because we've been talking about introductions, and you should have written an introduction now, what I'd like for you to do is to go to our homepage, and if I can do this here, on our homepage towards the bottom, you're going to notice that there's an introduction workshop, and there should be one for every class. And what you'll simply do is go to your own paper and copy your introduction anonymously, and you're going to paste it on the page. And when we do that, it should look a lot like this right here. You'll actually have a place where you can paste your introduction, and we'll be able to workshop it together as a class. Please keep in mind that when we do this, even though I won't be able to comment on every single introduction because there are 100 of them, I hope that by covering some of them in depth, what you'll be able to do is apply the information you've seen across this production to your own work and to grow as a writer. If you don't understand anything, please look through and read the other introductions from your fellow students because they have much to teach.